started. It's 5:30, April 25th, Budget, Finance, and Administration Committee. I'd like to call it to order. We need to approve the minutes from February 14th.
Make a motion.
Any corrections? Yes, actually, we have a correction. Under discussion regarding possible funding options, first sentence, there's a typo there at the end, going, G-O-I-G. That was the only problem I found. Any other corrections, additions, deletions? All in favor? Aye.
Madam Chair, I'd like to amend the agenda to allow Mr. Mulder to present the fiscal year 2017-2018 budget process discussion prior to the strategic planning meeting portion of our discussion items.
That's a
Second.
motion. Okay. Any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. It's reversed. Okay, then, Mr. Mulder.
Yes, ma'am, thank you very much. At the previous workshop, we had a discussion about the strategic planning session, and it didn't leave us much time that late at night at the end to go over some of the budget discussions that I had prepared. So I hurriedly handed out a book to you guys that had a number of pieces of information in it about our budget development process. It had a couple of copies of the budget, the 3-year projection budget, as well as the administrator's recommended at this point in time in the process. So we gave you that book. I hope you've had an opportunity to look through it and look at some of the line items, look at some of the budget numbers, and some of the worksheets and information that we had put in there for you. Today, what I've handed you, the first of which is more important than the second. The second is just for your information. The second item, which is the non-colored Excel spreadsheet, that's basically just our retirement numbers. I know that Governor McMaster has signed the bill now, so the 13.56% increase in the employer contributions for retirement has gone into effect and will impact us for next year. So what we had previously done to determine projections is we just went through and gave a departmental list of how the impact of that new 13.56% would impact the budget. So this is, again, it's just for information. I've got the numbers factored into the budget documents themselves, but I wanted to at least show you how we came up with it. The first column is budget fiscal year 17. You can see that's what we had budgeted for this current year for retirement, $2.3 million roughly. And then we had already factored in an increase projection for next year when we initially started the budget process. And if you follow the second column down, you'll see we had already added $197,000 into the budget projection, at least where we were currently in the budget. And then the third column is the actual fiscal year 18 state increase. So you can follow that column down at the bottom. You can see the $503,181. That's the total impact that bill will have on our employer contributions. But since we had already factored in $197,000, you can see just at the very bottom, the $306,100. That's the additional impact above and beyond what we had already projected. So, and you can see the concurrent years, 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23. There is a 1% increase for those 5 years as well. So we've also factored in future impacts of additional amounts for 189, 190, 189, and so forth. So that's all. That's just for your information, just to show you how we came up with those numbers. We factored those in. The second piece of paper I gave you was a simple, very simplified way of presenting to you how the budget has transitioned from this current year to next. I've updated that. The original one was in your book that I gave you the other night, but we have updated that based on progress since then. So let me kind of go over that real quick, if you don't mind, in some detail. Under the first orange section where it says lost revenue, I basically took the fiscal year 17 budget and showed where the revenues, what the revenue impact is going to be for fiscal year 18, the next year's proposed budget. So we've removed the fund balance usage revenue. We've removed the transfer from Tri-County Tech. We removed the Economic Development Fund transfer. And then we also had just a miscellaneous lost revenue as a total. So we saw a total budget reduction from fiscal year 17 to 18 of almost $1.8 million. The next section down is our total expense changes. And what we did was, if you remember, when we amended the budget this current fiscal year, we actually took some of the additional debt service revenue that we had moved over, and we put that into the fund balance replenishment. So obviously, we won't have that again next year. So we've removed that. We've added back in $481,711 for the full carry cost of the sheriff department salary structure. We were able to cut another $1 million almost worth of expenses out of the operational budget. So you can see that $988,840 that we've removed. We added back in, at that point, the OPEB, the post-employment benefit annual required contribution of $600,000. And then we also reduced some other miscellaneous expenses of $20,000. So you can see a total reduction in expenses of $1.3 million when you factor all those in. That put us, at that time, is where we were with the budget development process, out of balance by about $500,000. Now, since then, Ms. Kamick and I met to go over that particular document and some other line item questions that she had after that meeting. And what we're proposing at this point, or what I'm proposing at this point coming out of that meeting, was to remove the OPEB back out. That's the expense reduction of $600,000. We've removed $3,500 in the assessor's overtime budget. And then we've also removed a number of departmental, or reduced the number of departmental vehicle maintenances. The reason why we were able to remove those is because since we're not replacing, or proposing to replace any vehicles and equipment, major capital equipment or vehicles this year, the vehicle maintenance director asked that we increase the vehicle maintenance expenses because now everything's a year older and we're seeing some increased cost due to age. So we increased that significantly. So what I was able to do is go back in, evaluate those further, and reduce some of those departments that have a lot of equipment and a lot of vehicles, and we reduced their vehicle maintenance back down a little bit more. And that's what those reductions are. The medically indigent assistance program, that's a requirement. We receive a formula calculation every year based on population and other factors. And then we're required to pay that in for the medically indigent assistance program. We got our letter in after the last time we met, and it was actually for $6,839 less than what we had proposed from the prior year. So we were able to reduce that amount, and that is a definite. Then we added back in, this is the state retirement increase. We got the finalization of that after the last meeting, so we added the $306,100, which directly correlates to the number on this for the additional state employer contribution for the retirement. So that put us at that point about $150,500 still out of balance. There's been a lot of discussion about our employee costs and personnel costs and the number of employees that we have. There was some discussion about doing a reduction in force, if you will, and eliminating a number of positions. We had talked about previously around 15 is kind of where we would want to be. So what I've done is shown you what the proposed additional expense reduction would be by eliminating 15 positions. It would save you roughly $540,000 if you add that into those savings into the $150,000 out of balance. It puts you with a positive surplus of $396,509. Those monies could be allocated for other purposes or for fund balance replenishment or whatever. So based on my meeting with Ms. Kamick, based on continued research into the budgetary numbers, that's what we have come up with at this point in time. I did not present you with a whole nother book. I figured it'd be easier instead of wasting paper and giving you yet another whole nother book, just to show you the summary changes of where we were. Everything that's in the orange and blue sections up here are exactly how it's represented in the book, and then everything underneath it is how we can make the adjustments in the future if council want to discuss those. I am prepared tonight with information on every department. If you were able to look at this and you have any particular specific questions about departments or line items or any of the information that you have reviewed in this book, I'm prepared to answer those tonight. That's where we are in the budget development process currently.
Any comments?
Yeah. Madam Chair, I got quick question. Do we have any idea where we are going to finish the year financially, what you think we'll have left that normally that fund balance?
Yes, sir.
Usage used to be used to balance the next year's budget, but that could be in tune, go back into our fund balance to help get that back where it should be.
Yes, sir. Our intent is for any savings in this current year's budget to replenish the fund balance, right, instead of spending it again.
Correct.
Our current estimate, we actually start monitoring that starting in January 1, after you've had 6 months. Ms. Price and her staff actually starts evaluating that. We look for savings and we begin taking it, if you will, from the department so it doesn't get spent, to accumulate as much as we can and reduce spending. One of the biggest areas that we were able to find a consistent amount is through fuel. We always estimate a very high per gallon fuel rate in the event you have a spike in the fuel. You know, we were at a time, we're over $3 a gallon. Right now, we've been lucky. We've been at 2 or below for the whole year, but we use like a $3.25 per gallon estimate when we factor in our fuel costs.
Right.
So we actually have already gone in and depleted some of their fuel costs based on that and set it aside. And sometimes we take that to pay for, you know, additional items or studies or anything like my contingency would pay for. But for the most part, usually at this part of the year, in March, we start going in and estimating what departments will need for the rest of the year, department by department, and we actually start reallocating those funds and pulling some of that back as well. In April, we usually put them in a budget freeze. We did not do that this year because based on our evaluation, we were tracking pretty good. So we didn't do a freeze this year. We did the last 3 years in April, but this year we're tracking better. So we've monitored it. Right now, it looks like it's going to be anywhere from $150,000 to $300,000 worth of surplus in expenses. Now, if our revenues come in even higher, that's going to add to that amount. And usually our revenues will come in right at, sometimes just below, but we usually have cut our expenses down enough to accommodate that. So we're guessing anywhere from $150,000 to $300,000 is what we're going to have remaining this year.
What is that fund balance right now? I didn't have that sheet. Do you know
Fund
what
balance
that?
right now is at just over $5 million, right around $6 million, if I remember correctly. I did not, yep, I have my audit right here. Now, obviously, we don't have this year's, but after our fiscal year 2016, our fund balance is that's combined, sorry, let me get to the one that's not combined, so I can get you just general fund, here we go. Unassigned is at 5.8 million. Now you can factor in the solid waste reserve of 2 million, which is an assigned category, so in all, when you wanna talk about an unassigned spendable money, you're right at about $7.8 million.
Okay. And what is the amount that we need to keep in there? What's the normal?
10 to 13, if you,
Okay.
is 25 to 35%? I can't remember the actual percentage, but we've got a percentage set up, it's like 25% of our
Okay.
prior year's general fund balance, or general fund budget. And that would put it anywhere from 10 to 13 million dollars is the range that we'd like to be in.
Okay.
And obviously, you know, the biggest issue we've had with that reduction has been the
Broadband.
carrying cost of the broadband project, and that's been the biggest factor.
But now, whatever income we get from the broadband's gonna go back in.
Yes, ma'am.
That was part of the deal, right?
That's correct.
So how many years? It was 200 the first year, then nothing for a few years?
The first year was nothing, and then it was 200 going there forward.
Okay,
We gave him a break in the first year, give him some operating capital in order to, he had quite a few expenses that he was gonna have to incur just to get it started.
Sure.
So we gave him a break on the first year to maintain operating capital, and then pick up in the second year. There's actually a balloon requirement in year 12. 10. Year 10, there's actually a balloon requirement option to where we can, within 10 years, have a full payback of the agreement between he and I, which will put us about even, and we'll get our money back.
okay.
We may be a little short, about $500,000 when it's all said and done, but it's a lot closer than 5, 6, 7 million.
It's okay.
So hopefully within 10 years, we'll have that all paid back versus the 18 or 19 that we were looking at before.
Any other comments?
I'd just like to thank Mr. Mulder for his hard work in paring down this budget, and also, of course, finance staff, Ms. Price and her team. Appreciate y'all. Hard work. We know
I'd
you've
like
given
to-
us a lot of, you've cut a lot. Appreciate that. Sorry.
No,
Madam
that's okay,
Chairman?
finish. Yes, go ahead.
I'd like to pat you on the back for what you've worked and done on this.
I'm not looking for pats on the back, but thanks. I'm just looking to save money. I do have a suggestion to make. Given that we live in the land of inadvertent consequences, I'd like to suggest that we take a portion of the total that's left over and assign it to the volunteer fire stations. They're having trouble staffing during the week, during the day, because most of their volunteers have jobs. They have no trouble staffing on weekends, they have no trouble staffing on holidays, they have no trouble staffing on nights, but weekdays are a problem. So they were hoping we would contribute some more money to the volunteer fire stations out in the unincorporated areas of the county so they can actually hire some part-time paid staff to help them out in those areas where it's hard to cover.
Is that a motion, Madam Chair?
That was a suggestion, but I'll take a motion if you want to make one.
I'll make that motion then.
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion on this?
What's the motion?
To assign some of the leftover balance to the volunteer fire stations so that they can help fund some
Right,
part-time
but
positions.
like, is there an
to
amount that we're
They
talking?
were hoping between 200, 245. They'll be happy with whatever we can give them.
I would have to bring that up under, I think that's Mr. McCall's, committee, correct? Fire department.
I mean, if, she's got a point. They can't get people during the week, and what's happened is, Julian, remember back in the old days, the cotton mills had fire, you hear the siren blow, and the policy of the mills where everybody just haul freight out the door
Right.
and go to the fire station, and we ain't got no more cotton mills.
But and I understand that. I'm just, to me, it seems very premature to vote on it without having where we're going, because it's, what I've seen happen before is we save some money here and we spend it somewhere else. And that's the things they do a wonderful job. And I'm not saying that,
Well, if you want it brought
I'm not
before my
against it.
committee, there's no problem at all.
yeah, I just think we
What
need to
purpose
really.
is that going to serve?
I don't know.
You bring it up in front of 3 out of the 5, all 5 are here today.
Okay, whatever you say, Madam Chair.
Well, that's not a command. I'm just asking, what benefit would it be to bring it before the committee?
Well, it just gives you a little bit of time because we've gone to saving to get us back going in the right direction, and then we're automatically spending without having a chance to.
But here's the deal with that, and maybe I didn't tell the complete story. This is an unintended consequence by us continuing with the municipality contracts. That is a thorn in their side. Okay, we all agreed that it's important to fund those municipality contracts, but it's at the expense of the volunteers. And the volunteers are fed up, they feel we're abusing them. That's the terms I've heard used, okay? And I do not wish to abuse our volunteers, okay? They cannot be running away from their jobs, during the day to help, and they need this. So we need to reconsider, over the next few years, what we're going to do about those municipality contracts. For the moment, we'll let those ride. I had asked Mr. Mulder to actually obtain some statistics from the municipalities, because I'd like to see, out of all the money we're giving them, how much, in fact, goes to fire. I have this funny feeling that not 100% of it goes. So I'd like to know more about that, and he's working on that.
I have everybody but one city, and I'm waiting to get that final city in.
But in the
Just-
meantime, we
just
need to
for,
help our volunteers.
A good example of that, you know, to take my district, for example, with Westminster on top of the, you know, 285 some odd thousand that we spend, they're reportedly spending over $500,000 in addition to that for their fire. So, you know, this fire talk is huge. It's not a small matter. It's bigger. I mean, to me, I am in no way have the ability to even think through this because it's a huge, I mean, to me, I have no issue, you know, thinking about it and then coming back with a comprehensive fire plan on where we are deciding to go as a council. But it's got to be more than just saying, you know, oh, we've saved here, because it's huge.
It
Like you
is
said, it's
huge.
in the fire contracts and everything. So that's
It
one
is
of the
huge, but
things.
they need some relief now, not 5 years from now. And like I said, this was an unintended consequence of us extending the fire contracts that were due to expire, what, this June?
They were set to expire last year, but we extended them 1 year.
We extended them by
So
1
it's
year?
this June again, yes, ma'am.
You know, and so they're getting fed up with that, and this is not a good way to roll.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Moeller, you give us your opinion of this? Since you're the money shifter, or
The opinion.
The money
of-
shifter.
The money shifter.
The money shifter.
My opinion on the plan to add money in for the,
for the volunteer firemen?
sure. My opinion actually would have been to cancel the city contracts and follow through with a more comprehensive phased approach of improving our fire service and reallocating those funds, but recognizing the issue there and what issues it would cause for them, we backed up, so we'll continue those fire contracts. But in order to continue to provide the services to the volunteers that are necessary, this would be a good phased-in first step in order to provide that service. The idea was the $1.3, $1.4 million that we're currently providing to the cities in total was what we were gonna use to continue servicing and improving for the volunteers. But since we can't do that, this would be a great next step to be able to provide the service that's necessary for a much lower cost versus, you know, the million or so that the full plan would cost us. Again, though, we would have 1.4 million coming back if we implemented the full plan. So my opinion is it's something the volunteers need. You know, obviously adding $200,000 worth of expenses to the budget's difficult. You know, we are cutting 15 positions. We're gonna have $400,000 left over, and now we're adding back additional staff and costs for the fire department. As long as that's a priority and that's where council wants to invest those funds, that's fine. But it is something that's needed.
How many volunteer firefighting, how many stations? Seven?
There's a total of 17, not counting the substations. And the substations, we're not talking about staffing, just the actual.
So you're talking about, I did $14,000 in my head. Is that right? Divided by 17. So you're talking about giving each station $14,000.
Close to it. What'll happen is you'll actually hire people that you'll have staffing in each station
Right.
during the day. So we already have some full-time staff, so you don't have to hire one for every station. I think there was 5 people, if I remember correctly, that would be needed in order to implement this plan, and that's where you're getting the 245 from.
I got a question also. Are we gonna phase out the funds for the city? I mean, is that to where?
Part of the information I'm waiting on from them is give us what you could digest or swallow or handle on a phased-out approach. What does that look like? Is it 5 years? Is it 3 years? Is it 10 years? What will be the minimum amount of time that you would need, or minimum and maximum amount of time you would need in order to phase this out? Are we talking 10% a year, 20%? So I'm kind of waiting on their input on that as well. Like I said, I've got the fire statistic numbers from 2 of the cities. I'm still waiting for one more at this point. And I'm still waiting on that information as well.
Well, out of the 2 that you've got, are they showing that they can do a decrease?
They haven't given me that information.
Oh, okay,
All they've given
okay.
me is their run statistics and cost
Okay.
statistics.
You would cripple the cities if you took away if you just took away what we're paying and expected them to continue to do the fire as they're doing, it would cripple their budget.
Yes, but the biggest complaint I get from the volunteers is that when the cities show up, they show up one man, one truck. Okay, but when the volunteers show up, they show up in full force, yet they don't get you know, the relief they need, and we're giving all the money to the cities. It's a battle. It's an ongoing battle.
And if
I'm
you-
trying to find a happy medium, and after my meeting with some of the chiefs, with Mr. King, or Chief King, the happy medium was just to try and hire a few part-time people to provide the volunteers with some relief. So I feel this is important. This is one of the top functions of a county government before paying for swimming pools and all that. So I'd like to see it happen.
What,
Have a motion?
what was the,
We already had a motion.
Do we have a second? Okay, go ahead, I'm sorry. Didn't
what
mean
was
to
the
interrupt.
amount? Was it 700 and some odd $1,000 to implement the total fire plan that you were talking about?
No, sir, actually, there would be a savings if we went full board with canceling the city contract. You'd save about $1.4 million in monies paid to the cities. You would need to then hire folks, in order to staff the stations, staff the bounty land, and that would put it up roughly 7, 8, 900,000 when you look at all the operational expenses. Then, the remaining part of the money would go towards the capital replacement program, in order to fund the proper replacement of the equipment, over a time frame. Now, we, hopefully with going to the cheaper trucks, for every station, we can extend that time frame and reduce the annual cost, but the other remaining portions of those savings would go into funding that program. So while there was no net gain or net loss, the monies would be reallocated for a better purpose, if you will.
Right, okay.
I think,
I just, you know, to me personally, this is a huge issue, and there's just no way I could just, you know, we've just got on paper here what we're trying to do to balance a budget and save a budget, and with everything coming down, you know, I would, you know, as much as great as, I think it's a bigger issue, it's more than $14,000 a station, which is what that $245,000 would be of an issue
Not
to
really
them.
per station. You're hiring people to float amongst the stations. So then the volunteer staff knows what day there'll be somebody there, and they can attend to their own personal business during that time and not worry about having to, on that particular day and time, to
But-
worry about fire protection.
If we're gonna solve the problem, let's create a solution. The $245,000, it sounds like a, you know, a Band-Aid to me when we're just now balancing the budget. And, you know, we're trying to be conservative by cutting 15 staff members, but we're not truly solving the problem of what we're trying to accomplish on, you know, the fire protection. If we're going to provide a solution in fire protection, then let's do it. Do it the right way, not $245,000 at a time, or whatever we decide to do.
Go ahead, Paul.
I just want to ask, Mr. Mulder, if our volunteer firefighters were paid firefighters, what effect would that have on our annual budget?
if we were a paid system, you're adding at least $5 to $5.5 million of expenses to your budget,
Okay.
at least. This-
So
At one time, there was an estimate that in order to not have volunteers, it'd be over $7 million dollars is what I worked up, and that was 6 years ago. But right now, it'd be about $5.5 million minimum added to your budget.
So we are currently seeing a massive savings if you look at it worst case scenario. If we were to pay every single volunteer under Mr. Mulder's estimates. So we must preserve at all costs that cost savings. Because if the volunteers get too upset and they decide they don't want to volunteer anymore, then we have a much bigger issue on our hands than that the city fire contracts pale in comparison to. So, you know, this is a very dicey political situation. I understand that. Right now, it is my speculation that we are probably, to some extent, the county is subsidizing municipal fire operations. I don't think that's fair. But understanding that it is a complex issue, and the fact is they've relied on this money for a long period of time, just like, the county relied on the local government funding for a long period of time, and then it was snatched away. So I do believe that that we need to look at phasing this municipal fire funding out. Or else we're gonna have to raise taxes. How many mills is that? 5.5 million, 10 to 11 mills to fix an issue that's currently costing us $500,000. Now, Mr. Davis, I agree with you. We're moving backwards, but we can't make everybody happy. And at some point, somebody's gonna have to be mad at us. And right now, we're saving an awful lot of money in keeping our volunteer firefighters happy. So it's a difficult situation, and somebody's not gonna be happy at the end of this, I think.
Ms. Campbell. Important thing to remember about the volunteers, they can quit anytime they want to. We could be sitting here one time, well, we're not gonna give you no money, and next thing you know, they get a phone call, well, that station we were manning, we decided all just go home. And then we got nobody. I mean, they go, I wouldn't be a volunteer fireman. Heck, all the training, the days and nights they spend in classes on their own free time, go to class all day, get a free hot dog or whatever. We're getting a good deal here. These guys are pretty dedicated. I agree with Mr. Kane. Like Paul said, we're getting a good deal out of it. I'd hate to make them mad and they all pack up and leave. Because it's a touchy situation when you're asking people to volunteer. Now, if they're paid, then you say, you better show up or else. But, we're kind of, and I've been getting the same calls she has. The fire chief's been coming by. Well, what do you asking me, well, what do you expect us to do? We spend all day Saturday, Sunday down there washing trucks, pulling maintenance and going to classes. And we're not paying anything for the classes. We're not paying any, they do it on their own. So I agree with, Julian's brought a point. Well, we save money, then we spending money, but on the other hand, we can't make the volunteers mad. Not mad, as you volunteer, you don't make them mad, you're disappointing. Let's use that word rather than mad. Thank you.
We just got to create a solution. And how many staff do you think it takes? Like, if we were going to staff those areas, how many, because that's the issue with the motion. We don't have the number of staff, and we truly don't have, a dollar figure. And let's be honest, $200,000 and some odd thousand does not go a long way when we're trying to do what we're after. So what's gonna happen is each station's gonna have a floater, and this person's supposed to be here, and they're supposed to be over here, and I get it. There's nothing
Actually, in
better.
this plan, every station would have somebody every day.
And
They wouldn't be floaters.
what would the cost associated with that be? What would the true cost of that person would be on the county payroll, correct?
Correct.
And they would get county benefits and everything else. What would that cost be?
The $265,000 would be the total cost.
With-
That includes insurance and everything.
Can you get?
Right now, during the shift, we've got four or five people on a shift at a time that floats between all of the stations. And they don't just sit there and drive a truck, they do all their maintenance. They do all
Right.
their hose checking, cleaning, they do all their pump testing and clean the station. I mean, they're there to do work for this volunteer, so they don't have to, regular work. They do paperwork, run reports, a lot of different things for them, and drive the truck when they get a call, which is, regular. But right now, we've got about 4 or 5 guys that rotate. They'll spend a certain amount of time in this station one day, and then won't be back for 3 or 4 days. This will allow one person at every station every day, during the week, during the day.
So at 8 positions currently that you have 8 positions reduction in force at 266,000. You're saying that you could have How many additional? I guess the firefighter, that position is not as valuable as what you're talking about eliminating here?
No, they're actually more valuable. We'd be adding about 5 people for that price range, for the 265. I think it's 5.
Okay.
So they're actually more valuable than, these are clerical type positions that are,
Do you know what stations those would be? Or you don't know the answer?
would be all of them. I mean, that, we'd have somebody in every station at that point. Right now, we float. And one person covers 2 to 3, 4 different stations over a time period. This plan that Ms. Kamick has presented to you for the money for that plan, it would have somebody in every station every day.
So, Madam Chair, your motion is to add 5 positions to this budget. It's not just to see what that looks like, or are we saying that that's what we're doing? We're gonna make it work?
We're gonna make it work for them, not because I feel like it.
No, well, I understand that. I wasn't,
So what are the consequences of that? Do we dip into fund balance? Do we have offsetting cuts? What's the proposed, where are these funds coming from?
I'm assuming if she's looking at this sheet, what she would propose is if we implement this as it's written or typed, the final total would go from 396 down to, final total surplus would be reduced by the 220,
Gotcha.
250, whatever the
Okay.
number ends up being, the 265.
265. Okay, thank you.
Do we have to have 265, or can we go with 200? I mean, what's the cheapest way we can go is what I'm asking.
Yes, sir. I'm actually texting Chief King right now just to get
Okay,
some
okay.
clarification on exactly how many that would add and what they need in order to
Okay,
staff the station. So
okay.
hopefully he'll respond. He's usually pretty good.
I thought you was doing math on the
Nope.
computer.
I just text Charlie just to make sure we've got the right numbers.
Okay, well.
so we don't
that's
even know
cooking.
what positions we're reducing or anything now. That's just an estimate on,
I have an idea. That's the number we were talking about, so I've kind of gone through. I have 8 of them pretty much already identified. And, you know, the other 7, I have some ideas on how to implement that.
and removing going back just to, removing the OPEB out of the 600,000. Is that not something we're going to pay for later?
Well, that's something I think it's about time we discuss one more time, this OPID situation. I don't like the idea of taking away something that was promised to an employee, especially a long-term employee. Nevertheless, sorry for the language, but we're getting screwed by the state because they mismanaged the state retirement fund, so now we have to pay a whole lot of money for that. So OPEB grants the individual $150 a month till Medicare age. Do they want $150 a month, or do they want their retirement? The rest of us in the private sector, we have to save for our retirement. And if we mess that up, it goes away, and there's nobody there to fill in the blank. Okay, if you mess up your retirement account, it's gone. Okay, but there's no consequences here. And that's what irritates me about the state and their retirement plan. Okay, they can just ask the taxpayer to contribute, whereas the rest of us don't have that privilege. So, I believe you've said in the past, we're only one of 3 counties that still have OPEB?
Yeah, there were one of few that still provide the benefit, and actually, we may be, one of the 3 is the only ones that are funding it.
That are funding it.
Right, the other ones are adding the liability to their books, but the majority of them have done away with the benefit. And it's actually, we pay for their we pay their health insurance as if they're an employee until they're age 65, and then they get the Medicare supplement of $150 until they die.
But it's the 150 that this 600,000 covers, or the whole
All
thing?
of it. Basically, what the OPEB calculation is every year you have an actuarial study done, and they come in and they say, okay, based on your current employee count, if all of them stay with you until retirement, here's how much money it's gonna cost you long-term to pay for all those people based on the plan you've laid out. Okay, so right now, our total liability is about $8 million. I think it's around $8 million is what our total liability is. But they say, well, you don't need to pay $8 million right away, but you're gonna need to add money every year to it, because eventually these people will retire, and that's your annual required contribution to set money aside to pay for all these retirees later. And that number is based on your actual plan. We pay the health insurance, so it estimates what the annual cost is for an old person to have insurance from the time they retire to the age of 65. So then they take a look, okay, what's the age of this person? How many years will they work to retirement? What is their age at retirement? So how many years do you have to pay for their health coverage until they're 65? Then, what is their estimated life expectancy? How long will they get the 150, actually it's a little more than that now, it's went up, $150 a month. And then they say, okay, that person, employee A, is gonna cost you $50,000 in health insurance costs until Medicare, and then another $5,000 for the rest of their life for the Medicare supplement. So you need $13,000, no, $55,000 for that person. That's what they're gonna cost you. So we're gonna make you put away $4,000 a year for that individual, because you're gonna have to set aside $55,000 for their care when they retire. And that's how they calculate it. And then when you have people leave, they recalculate it every year based on the demographics of your employees, and that's what the ARC is. They're saying for all the people you have right now working for you, you need to set aside every year $600,000 to cover their costs when they retire.
So all those counties that aren't funding it anymore, they're not gonna have the money, then what?
It's a cash expense for them. So but what they're saying is, we feel like we'll just pay for those expenses out of our budget every year. Is what they're saying. And we're doing that right now. All of our current retirees, we've been paying for just out of the budget, as a cash expense. I mean, the likelihood that everybody's gonna stay with you till retirement, everybody that's eligible, the likelihood they're gonna stay with you till retirement is pretty slim. And the likelihood that, I think that's the only likelihood I had. I thought I had more than one. That's the only likelihood. You know, you have some that'll pass away and won't even get the benefit, even though we've been setting money aside for them. And there's a formula, they factor that in. They say, hey, a certain percentage of people aren't gonna retire with you, so the money you've set aside for them, we don't need to worry about anymore. We'll use it for somebody else, and then they adjust your ARC. I mean, there's a book about this thick where they calculate the ARC. I don't understand it completely. I understand the bird's eye level, the high level. So, what happens if you don't fund it? Basically, you have a liability that shows on your books. You'll see the OPEB liability, it's in your audit. We'll show the OPEB. We've got $1.2 million set aside in our OPEB reserve right now. And our liability is actually shown in the notes to the financial statements, right? It's not shown on our balance sheet. It's a note. So it's a note that's added to the back of your statement. It doesn't actually hit your books per se yet. It's coming. They'll start hitting your books soon. A new GASB will come out and they'll say, well, it doesn't need to be a note. You need to show that as part of your total asset and liability breakdown. So it's coming, but right now they just added it as a note. 11.1 is our total right now. So we're at $11.1 million that's added to our financial statement notes, showing us as a liability for our total. But we actually have set $1.2 million aside, which, we're underfunded, but we have set some aside at least. But like I said, it won't be long and GASB will come out with a GASB 79 and say, well, it's no longer a footnote, we're now gonna make you add it. Just like the retirement, now we have to add that in here as well. Eventually, it'll be added to your liabilities on your asset liability list, and it'll reduce your total fund balance, or net worth, if you will, net equity, a number of different.
I know there's been a lot of talks to what is going to possibly be added to our budget in the horizon. I know, Madam Chair, you spoke of it several times. And again, it brings me up the ability to create a solution that's not, let's cut 15 and add, it's, let's take the $600,000 out, let's balance it with the fund balance. is kind of what's got us to this point, that's got us, in my opinion, stretched very, very thin to where you're really worried about that $245,000 instead of saying, okay, let's really look at a comprehensive fire plan. If we're unable, if you're gonna cripple the cities, let's look at how we can support the cities, that may not be through the financial fire plan. So it's bigger than just taking money away from them, because they do service a lot. I mean, the volunteers are gonna tell you one thing, and they do a phenomenal job, and they come out in full force, always. And the cities are gonna tell you that they do. They
Well, the
both
cities aren't
do.
really telling us
Well,
what they're
just hang on.
doing because they're not filling out their statistical reports.
Right, and that to me
Walhalla
Take-
does.
With the exception of Walhalla.
takes the next step in what we're truly trying to accomplish on a comprehensive fire plan of where, we're getting involved in our districts on the fire side of things. And I know that most of us on here are, but to truly understand that if we're going to fix it, let's fix it. What does that look like? And I just hate seeing removal of an item. I mean, Wayne says it all the time, kicking the can down the road, and now somebody's got to pick it up. That's what I don't want to happen here tonight, is that, we do this instead of looking at a comprehensive fire solution.
Yeah, but you're not going to have that by the end of June.
But we can.
Oh, please. It's going to take a lot longer than that to come up with a comprehensive solution to all our financial problems.
I'm speaking directly with fire on how 265,000, correct, works in the budget.
Yeah, 265, Charlie responded, and I need to correct, 265 is a total of 6. The middle ground at 245 was where we were talking about 5 people.
Five.
So the 265 is 6 personnel, and that will be added to the 6 new. We have 4 per day already, plus an existing battalion chief. So I was wrong. That will give you 11 of 16, not the full 16 coverage. 11 of 16 stations will be covered. And the 17th is our camp, is our Station 21, which is our paid staff station. So we've got 16 of the volunteer stations that would be covered. 11 of the 16 volunteer stations would get coverage every day. Now, they would rotate, I'm assuming, to the other ones that aren't getting coverage too.
And if you covered those other 5, if my math works right tonight.
No. Right now, we're only covering about 3 or 4 a day. This would give us the capability of covering 11 a day.
Right, but I'm saying if you covered all of them,
You need another 5 on top of this.
Correct.
So you'd need to add another 250 on top of the, 265. Or
And when they came to me
45.
with their complaints, I asked them what was the middle of the road solution. They're not asking for the Cadillac solution. They're asking for a solution that will just help them out for the moment. And so I said I would bring it up. And so here I am bringing it up. Do we want to talk about something else for a while, or do we want to vote on this?
Well, you already got a motion in a second.
I know, but I'm all for talking, so.
just to clarify what this would mean, basically, the motion and second basically would be to direct me to factor in that additional expense into the budget. It's not a it's not a finality of the decision. You still have to actually approve the budget document. So what I will do, coming out of this meeting, any direction I get, if you guys approve of this, I'll ask you to approve this, and then I'll present the recommended budget for next year in its final form. Again, it's not final, because you guys can still amend it even through the budget approval process. You can get to third reading and still amend it to do something different.
Sure.
But I will then know for sure the recommended budget to present based on your direction at this point.
so what happens if out of the 5 fire stations that we're not going to staff, 3 of those are in one of y'all's district? How does, that's my issue here, is we've got 5 left out. What is that 5?
No. The idea is that the staff would rotate to give some relief certain days a week during the month to a particular station. That was the problem they were looking to resolve. They just wanted some relief during the week. And it doesn't have to be every single day. But it'll be on a schedule that they are aware of, so they know when those days are freed up.
So it's not a total solution to the issue that the volunteers have suggested, but it's a middle-of-the-road solution.
That will help them
We-
out right now.
I mean, we've got to, just like the state has been cutting us down and the feds have been cutting the states back, we cannot keep being the man in the middle or the woman in the middle, that, to be politically correct, to just stand in the gap and say, all right, if it comes down to it, we'll just raise county taxes so y'all don't have to, and so y'all don't have to. I mean, either we've got to take the philosophical stance that we're never going to raise taxes, and that seems to be where we're at, or we got to say, well, we're getting squeezed by the state, and we've promised this to the cities, so we got to make it up somewhere. I mean, it's pretty simple. Are we going to consider raising taxes, or are we going to say we're not raising taxes? Are we going to keep spending into our fund balance?
That's
we
why
gonna-
the fund balance is as low as it is.
Are we going to consider other
It
sources of
survived with
revenue?
the fund balance as low as it is. The fact that it's as low as it is wasn't our doing, okay? That you can attribute mostly to broadband, and it will resolve itself with the broadband income. I'm not in a hurry to add more to that. We've existed with that for at least the 2.5 years that I've been on the council. I'm not such a pessimist to think that something so dire is going to happen that we're going to have to spend that. So I'm not worried about that.
But from a bond rating standpoint, we need to be in compliance with our accepted practices of what are the 25% of our last year's budget. I mean, we do need to increase our fund balance. There's no question about that.
It's a definite contributor to your
Yeah.
bond.
What's our bond rating right now?
We're AA plus.
Okay, so I don't see any detrimental effects right now.
Well, and it really only impacts you if you go out for new bonds. If you actually go out and issue a new bond in the future. You don't lose your interest rate that you have on your existing bonds. You've already got those locked in. So if for some reason, let's say in 2 years, they downgraded us to a double B plus, and we have to pay a little higher rate, the only way you have to pay the higher rate is if you take out any new bonds at that particular time. But it is good to still maintain a good positive bond rate.
Okay, any other comments on this topic? We have a motion and a second to direct Mr. Mulder to consider this as he continues to work on the budget. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. What else?
I guess now's a bad time to bring up a county council race. Just kidding.
I've already put one in there.
No,
We appreciate your sense of humor.
yeah. Madam Chair,
Yes.
at some point, I would like to discuss the possibility of of looking at a hospitality tax from a county standpoint. And we don't have to do it tonight, but I think that we're really stretching ourselves as much as we can. We're eliminating positions, and we have to find other sources of revenue. And I just wanted to bring that up and say it's something we should probably look at down the road. Because if we're not going to raise the millage, costs keep going up, and they seem to be rising faster than our millage, our mill value. And that's an unsustainable situation we're in. And it seems like the state is giving us less. And our pension fund liability from the state seems to be rising as well. So we're getting squeezed. Our revenue's not increasing as quickly as we'd like, but our expenses are increasing faster than we would hope they would. So it's just something we need to think about. I just wanted to bring that up.
Any other comments?
Going on to this next.
Okay, let's move on then to our strategic planning summary. I already gave you a copy of this, but I've started adding some resolutions to the back page. So we're slowly chipping away at this. There was something I needed to ask. We basically took care of the unpaid boat tax issue to the extent we could take care of it. Senator Alexander did acknowledge the receipt of our letter. I do have a question for Mr. Root regarding the dilapidated structure ordinance. The other day, I asked you a similar question, and you mentioned we were going to adopt the International Maintenance Code.
No, ma'am, I'm sorry. We already have adopted it. It's in
Okay,
place.
so do we actually need a new ordinance?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so
just
what
need
do we
money to
need
enforce it.
to kind of get this going?
Money.
Besides that? Nothing?
No,
Okay,
it's the
so
code
do we
enforcement.
how do we come up with a list of dilapidated structures that are potential structures we want to get rid of?
A code enforcement officer, to go out and to do that work. I think we've talked about it in this forum or with us, and I think the discussions have also been had with like the assessor's office, trying to find creative ways where we can label these structures when somebody's already out there perhaps, because we know that the financial constraints as to hiring a code enforcement person. So really that's the case. We're funding a code enforcement officer who could go out there and find every structure, label it, and start the process, because it's a process on each one, ultimately ending in, most likely, the county demolishing the structure, bidding it out perhaps, to do it on all the costs that go along with that, and perhaps recovering some portion of it, which is usually, a net loss. So, if it's the chair's desire for us to try to inventory all, I guess, the worst structures, and put a dollar number on what we can project it would cost to demolish the top 100 or something of that nature, and what we might see as being something we could recover as a fund for that, so what the net loss would be. I think we can do that, but that's gonna cost money. But at least we could start it, I guess, do a survey. But as far as the law being in place, we have that. It's just a matter of the code enforcement officer and then the actual funds to pay for the demolition of the structures. And we haven't been able to locate any grant funds, still available. We've been looking at.
We have not.
We have not.
Mr. Mulder, that code and litter enforcement officer that we were kind of working on there together, you said that cost was estimated at $75,000. Is that what you had originally?
Yeah, just in that particular evening, I looked at it, it was, anywhere from $75,000 to $90,000. If you're just talking about one individual, you're talking about a salary at, 40s, let's call it, and then you've got $10,000 for health insurance on top, that's 50s. And so, I mean, all in all with supplies, and that's not including any money to pay for demolition, that's just the operational.
Right.
I'd say anywhere from 70 to 90,000, let's say.
Would you propose, I guess, in those structures, I mean, I've seen a few makeshift dump sites in the county that not just one person's dumping on several, I mean, including a road going into it next to one of the pieces of property that we, the county, own. That piece of property has, I mean, it's got a piece of a structure on it. Do we have the machinery capable of picking up that trash and putting it into a bin and hauling it?
Yes, sir.
So we have that equipment. We're not demolishing skyscrapers here. We're talking about physical
No,
buildings.
you need excavators, loaders, and trucks.
And that property would be, first off, what would be the stages? Condemning? I mean, I'm talking bags of trash. I'm not talking house. I'm talking literally people are pulling in there and dumping trash. I'd be glad to discuss this with you afterwards to give you the exact piece of a property. But there's several in the county, but this is quite possibly the worst that I've ever seen.
The issue we'll have is if it's in, Mr. Root obviously can correct me in the process, but the issue we'll have is if the dumping is being done on private property, we have got to go through a due, process in order to notify the property owner of the violation, give them a due process amount of time to respond to us, to get it cleaned up. For us to go onto that property, we then have to go basically get a warrant, if you will, take it to a judge, show him the case file, the pictures. We can try them in the homeowner's absence. We have to notify them of the trial date. And the judge has got to say, okay, we hereby find you a violation. County, you can do this. Because we can't place a lien on the property for the cost unless it's been ordered by the judge, if I remember correctly, and I may be wrong. But we can't just go out there and clean it up. We now have to, if it's on private property,
Correct.
have to go through a due
Understand.
process for the property owner. If it's on public right-of-way, obviously we can just go out there and clean it up.
It'd be-
It's that simple.
It'd be about 75% public, private property, 25% right of way.
We could go pull the public, but unless we've gone through a violation procedure,
Right.
we can't just go.
So the filing, so the code enforcement officer would assist with the filing of these matters, and the cost associated at that time would strictly be the cost associated of the code enforcement officer plus whatever the filing of the, to our court would be.
It's a magistrate court procedure, if I remember correctly. So our operational cost, the 70, includes the person, a computer, a truck, fuel, paper.
What would,
It's basic expenses for them. So the code enforcement officer would go out there to this particular location, document, pull the address, pull the property owners, pull the TMS number, go pull the deed, verify the ownership, put that in his file. He'll pull a plat, he'll take pictures, he'll get some aerial photographs. All that he needs is evidence, is what he's starting to build. Because he's got to take this to a judge and prove with evidence that we have a violation of section such and such of our ordinance. The judge has got to say, you know what, you're darn right. Did you notify the person? Yes, we did. Here's my documentation, certified letters, return mail, blah, blah, blah. I gave him 15 days to contact me back. I gave him 30 days to clean it up. I've heard nothing. Here's all my evidence. And the judge say, you know what, you've done your job. You've given due process. You're right, there is a violation. We hereby find him guilty of International Property Maintenance Code. And I hereby allow and order the county to clean it up and place a lien on the property if the homeowner won't by a certain date.
where would we take whatever we're taking off that property? Where would that go and
If
what
it's
it costs to be
trash
shipped?
bags, I would hope that if he's a code enforcement officer, we would have cooperation with the sheriff's litter control and deputies and go through them and see if we can find any identifying information, just like the litter control officer does now. If it's just a couch, do we want to go as far as finding DNA in the couch and send it off? to
No,
testing?
I meant, like, where would we take the stuff that we're trashing?
C&D more than likely.
And there are
If it's bags of trash, we'll take it to our transfer station, pay for it to go to Homer, Georgia. If
It
it's a
probably
couch,
used to be bags of trash.
then we would pick it up and take it to the transfer station and go to Homer, Georgia. And we'd have to pay to haul it off. So not only do you have the cleanup expense, now you have per ton expense of hauling it to Homer, Georgia.
Correct.
as well.
That's what I'm just trying to estimate.
More than likely, from a recycling standpoint, if it's in that bad a condition,
Oh,
it's contaminated material that we won't be able to recycle anyway.
I don't think you'll want any of this.
Wouldn't the dilapidated structure, would that fall under the, fire marshal?
No, it would more than likely fall under the International Property Maintenance Code. The fire marshal will fall under if it's gonna be occupied, if it's gonna be inhabited, if it's a commercial structure. The building codes has jurisdiction over the buildings themselves. And we know that because we've had some discussion with the fire marshal and building codes. But if it's if we're enforcing it under the International Property Maintenance Code, then the building official has the pure jurisdiction over that.
I know Anderson's thrown about $2 million from what I can tell at such a cleanup effort.
And I was gonna say earlier, Mr. Ritter was very familiar with the grant program. We all saw the articles about that was sent to us. That program is no longer in existence, unfortunately. She's continuing to look for more, but as Mr. Ritter stated, has not located any. But that particular program is no longer funded.
Let's talk a little bit about cat and dog licensure. I've spent probably the better part of a year talking with a committee from the Humane Society and Animal Control, trying to come up with ideas as to how we can go about licensing our pets and contributing some funds then to our spay-neuter program to offset our spay-neuter program, which we shell out 80,000 every single year now. So we've reviewed county, city, various ordinances throughout the United States and came up with what we thought might work here. We picked up the phone and called several vets to make sure we weren't competing with them if we were to microchip along with providing the license. And they were all in favor of this. We talked to a lot of people. It's been really a major undertaking. So what I'd like for you to do is, take this with you at your leisure, read through it, and think about the prices that we threw in here. We had some really good discussion about pricing. And get back with me on your comments or suggestions or changes so we can kind of push this forward. We wanted to begin with dogs and see how that rolls out, the first year or two, and then move on to including cats. We didn't want to try and tackle both species all at the same time. What we were going to do was we were going to actually have clinics at the Humane Society on weekends, in the evenings, early in the day, various times a day, evening, and weekends to get this done. There is a program that they're already a part of that allows registration for licensure, so that's something they're already familiar with. So you can read the details later and just let me know what you think or how this should be changed or what the prices look like to you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I think we need to also include this until I talked to old Lamar Digby for the gas company. The people out there, this is great. We need to have the people that got, I don't know what you call a pet cobra, but people got pet cobras, monkeys, and all sorts of stuff. This place right here on Main Street, Walhalla, selling it. You want a cobra? Let's say you want them darn things. And that needs, these people, not so much as a license, to have a sign on the door, look, the house catches on fire. You don't wanna go busted in this thing. You might wanna let this one burn itself down because they got a cobra in there. And I said, you're kidding me. A cobra? Like you come out of a basket where you play a flute? He said, yeah, you buy them right there on Main Street.
Non-venomous.
There's no such
Cool.
thing. What they do is they remove the fangs, but the problem is the venom in the snake actually acts like saliva acts in our mouth. So it makes it very difficult for a cobra with its fangs removed to eat. That's actually quite cruel to remove the fangs from a venomous snake.
I think boogies hate
Little biology today.
You just
South
never,
Car-
you
South
just never know what you're
Carolina-
gonna learn at an Oconee County Council meeting, do you?
South Carolina has an exotic species law, and you cannot lawfully own a cobra in South Carolina, not to mention there is a long list of other animals that you cannot lawfully own in this state. So I think we need to review the exotic animal law,
Definitely.
and if someone's really violating the state law, then they need to be called on that. Having said that, pythons, boas, corn snakes are available for sale at PetSmart, and they are acceptable as pets. So if you'd like one. I like snakes.
Boy.
Okay. What else do we need to discuss today? Wayne, you had some comments to me earlier about government slow to act.
Yes, I do.
All right, do you want to enlighten us on some of those
Okay.
issues.
Now, do we violate personnel policy if I mention departments? Dave?
Well, try to not offend anybody in person. Rule number one, just the major concept, we're not going to offend or attack a certain person, okay?
Okay. Anyway, we had we've had problems. Andy Lee's here, glad he could come. Well, first off, we got problems with, first off, I'll bring up the least offensive first off. I get a call. This has happened over and over again. Did you know that the county cars down at Cabela's? Well, naturally, I didn't know. What you gonna do about it? Like I'm, all of us up here. I'm talking about every one of us. We set policy and budget. We don't handle personnel. That's Mr. Moore. I said, well, who was it? I don't know. It was a county vehicle. Well, did the guy look like so-and-so? I don't know these people. So here's my suggestion to Mr. Moore, and Scott and I have talked about this. Need to put on the side of these vehicles, property of Oconee County Motor Pool, official use only. On the back of the car, the sheriff's already done it. It's got a number on the front and the back. A deputy goes by you. That's the deputy driving car number 20. On the front of the car, got car number 20. On the side of the doors, got car number 20. We need to do this. Remove all from the doors of the car, assessor, building codes, whatever, off the door. The vehicles belong to the motor pool. You want a vehicle, you check the car out. And this eliminates a lot of this thing, which is the next thing I'm gonna get into, is when we were, me and Glenn, Adam, we were all in the military, you want a vehicle, you go down to the motor pool and check it out. You don't tell them what you're gonna get. I only want truck number such and such. You don't get that luxury. And that might eliminate a lot of this stuff. We get a phone call in the future. Car number so-and-so was seen somewhere that wasn't supposed to be seen. Well, that's easy. Mr. Moeller gets a call. Hey, car number so-and-so's down there parked somewhere doing something. Well, maybe it's legitimate. Maybe they're doing something, or maybe they're doing something they ain't supposed to be at. And this would eliminate a lot of that. And,
But I suggest they call me, because this person never called me about the car down there. I haven't heard of it, so I
yeah,
need
and
them
we,
to
and
also
see,
call
we,
me.
yeah, and another thing, we don't know whether it was just a bull story. But then I got another call about somebody, county car being at Ruby Tuesdays, and it was the assessor's office. And that was in Clemson. Now, was that you?
No, it's Mr. Root.
The
He
next,
checks out other departments' cars, so that way he's unnoticed.
I got you covered.
Now we're blaming the assessor's office, and he took it to lunch.
Let's just take everything off the cars.
Well, couple things from a checking the vehicle out standpoint, being slow to act, there are some departments that use them regularly every day. And it can be very problematic if they have to go down there and check one out every single day.
Well, then you put official use on the door.
Right, I don't have an issue with that. There's some departments that, like building codes, I mean, they get them every morning and go out every day. For them to have to waste 30 minutes to go check a car out is very inefficient. But we can definitely put, something stipulating official use on those particular vehicles.
They put a number on the front and the
We've
back.
got vehicle numbers assigned, most of them have it on the back, but we can make more prominently put it, around the vehicle. I like having the department's name on it, because it makes it a little more accountable that it belongs to that department. So if for some reason the car is driving down the road doing something and they can't get the number because they're passing them, they can hopefully at least get the name on the side of the door. So then we can at least narrow it down, well, it was a white truck in the building codes. I saw building codes on the side. So I kinda like having the name on there too, because it's another identifier to who the car belongs to for those departments that need a regular vehicle. But I can certainly look at putting the official use only on it, and more prominently displaying the vehicle. License tag numbers, if they can get those for the car that was parked in Ruby Tuesdays, if they would've just walked up, wrote down the license tag number,
Yeah.
called me with it, I could've nailed it down specifically. But when they call me and say a county car was there,
Yeah, what are you gonna do?
I need a little more than that.
The other thing, to the enforcement, this would come under your office. If you're doing something like this, and you're just gonna use it for private use, there should be some substantial penalty involved through our personnel policy manual. You get a reprimand, you get, so many days off without pay, and also a sticker on the dashboard. Handheld cell phone use prohibited. The military's putting in all their vehicles, all their trucks, handheld device prohibited.
So, the person that's driving a county car can't stop and eat lunch, and they can't, if they're going to a meeting in Greenville and they're on the way back and they're off the clock and they stop by.
Legitimate thing. But if you.
But I'm just saying, like, if we, I mean, that really, I don't, maybe that's,
Yeah, if.
I mean, we're gonna pay somebody to GPS track them and sit back in here and call up when, hey, why'd you stop there? I just think it's,
If I got a call that said somebody at 1 o'clock was at Ruby Tuesdays in Clemson, I'd check into it, and if they were, on that side of town doing business and broke for lunch and went and grabbed something,
Fine.
I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
We also have people who have take-home vehicles that are assigned.
Right.
The vehicle, in the personnel policy or the vehicle use policy, and we allow, stops on the way to and from home. Now, on a Saturday morning, do I want them going out to the store? No. But if they're headed home and they need to pick up milk on the way home, and they wanna
Right.
stop by Ingles on the way in, I allow that too. I allow people to drop kids off at school on the way in, if need be.
and I think the important reason for kind of bringing that up is from a council perspective, if we get these complaints, is to kind of talk about that. I mean, it's kind of perks of a job with officers, and, how many times do you get a complaint that, oh, all the fire trucks are at so-and-so eating lunch? 3 or 4 of them. Well, they gotta eat lunch and they can't be out of the fire, so that's why the fire trucks travel, and
They have to.
they have to
If they
anyway.
leave the station, if they're on duty, they have to take a fire truck.
And that's, one of the things, again, I brought it up to state that, as a council member, to kind of ease the problem, with this. Hey, chances are they're probably having a meeting, they could have run by, they run all kinds of errands. I see county cars all over the place, visiting. They come by and, go to their business to do, in between their lunch breaks to, pay bills. But that's, to me, is not a violation of what they're trying to do, and I think that's an importance, here, if they're calling us, that needs to be. Now, if it's one particular person and they're constantly on the clock not doing their job, then that's a bigger deal.
Well, what are you doing down at Cabela's in Anderson, eating lunch at Cabela's? That was one of the calls I got. What are you doing down at, Sporting Goods? I don't think the assessor is involved in sporting goods or
Hopefully they
anything.
meant Greenville.
Huh?
Was it Greenville? Because Anderson doesn't have a Cabela's.
It had to be Greenville.
It's, Greenville. It's at Cabela's.
Yeah, that's something that I need to know about. and I
What were
will
you
certainly
doing at
look into it.
Cabela's?
They do have a restaurant? I didn't know.
Getting beef jerky.
The other thing, one of the things I wanna bring up is the building codes department. All of us getting complaints. People come by the shop there. No sooner we get to the last Easter weekend, let's make up specific instances. Yeah, she's laughing. Get a call. Well, we're set up to pour a footing, foundation, and the building inspector shows up, and the concrete truck says he's gonna be an hour late. Well, he said, I ain't waiting, I'm leaving, you just reschedule for Monday. So these people called me up, I said, oh, got it, so I can't get hold of, so I called Katie. So try to get hold of David, Scott's out of town. She can't get hold of him. So finally, she got hold of Etta. And Etta investigated, well, the guy, Etta called, the head of the building codes, and the excuse was, and Etta was right, it's a lame excuse, I had a flat tire. Even Mr. Moeller said, my 14-year-old kid could change a tire. Or is he just didn't wanna drive that only vehicle, was that vehicle just, he said, what was going on here? The building codes, now here's what I'm getting into. I said, well, I've talked to plumbers, electricians, everybody. I said, why don't you complain? Why don't you go to the administrator? I don't handle personnel policy. I don't, it's not my job. He said, well, if you complain, they will come after you. You'll never get another inspection again. I talked to a plumber today at lunch. He said, no, I'm not saying a word, because you make them mad, they will make life miserable for you. They don't, Oconee County, you on the phone with one electrician, we don't even follow the National Electric Code. It's like we make up the rules as we go. And I asked Mr. Moeller for a cost-benefit analysis of building codes, and I'm gonna get into this a little bit further. Are they just here to embarrass the entire council? Are they making up the rules, or is this a power play that they're instituting? They forget, they work for the people of Oconee County. People of Oconee County, the builders don't work for them. They have to be available for the builder because they serve the building community. The next thing, carports and car sheds are temporary structures. They're not, you buy them, it's like buying a tent or whatever, it ain't permanent. After about 3 or 4 years, you'll find out how not permanent they are because they fall apart. Well, they got a sweet deal going. They're recommended that you gotta go down to a certain other builder seller of carports and sheds, and he's the only person that can stamp the drawings. I asked Mr. Moeller, I said, well, why don't you go to the Board of Licenses in South Carolina and find out whether this guy's got a PE number. He's claiming to be a structural engineer. As of this meeting, no such number exists. I'm looking for some papers right now, but building codes is funneling people down to his office. And I see Mr. Lee is out in the hall. He was gonna lend some comments. He's over the represents the Realtors Association. I tell him to get in here and get off the phone. But it's embarrassing for us that are elected, because the people elected us, and then these building codes is making up rules, not serving. They say, well, you just have to reschedule. Well, heck, a concrete truck's on the way. You can't stop time, tide, or the guy driving the concrete truck. You can't do it. You're gonna pay for that concrete regardless. And there's no reason. It's not Scott's problem for being out of town. He was out of town on a legitimate vacation.
But if he's got 10 more inspections lined up for the rest of that day, and one scheduled for a certain time immediately following that one, and he's now gonna wait around for an hour and miss the next one, and that contractor's gonna be mad because he's missed that one. So it does make it difficult sometimes to just completely accommodate the needs of the particular job.
I mean,
I don't know the specifics of that one, I'm just speaking in general terms.
well, Etta can tell you what the excuse was. Mr. Lee, come here. Talk to the microphone, please, if you don't mind.
Hang on just a second. I want to chime in here.
Okay. Stay
I
right there
had-
just a minute.
As you know, I had built one of those carports. And I know for a fact that the Building Codes Department discourages you from buying from certain people and encourages you to buy from others. But my bigger problem was the assessor showed up at my property today. And he said, what am I doing here? This isn't a permanent structure. We're not, This isn't going to be included in your assessment. And we said to him, oh, well, but since you're here, we knocked down our deck, so can you go back and remeasure this stuff? Because I know nobody came out for that. So he did. He went through the entire property and kind of redid everything. But the thing he came for, he alleged that he didn't need to be there for that particular.
So they sold Ms. Camick a building permit.
That's I don't mind, but we need to streamline that process as well for a pre-engineered structure like that.
Madam Chair, if I may, are we under strategic planning, meeting summary and discussion?
We are, but one of the things we were talking about is government is slow to act, and this kind of
Okay.
is part of that discussion in a way. It's issues that have come up that need to be addressed to make to either streamline our work or make it more efficient
Ms. Camick. Could I get Mr. Lee to come up here?
quickly.
Come on up here.
Outside, what are we talking about?
Huh?
So I was outside, but what am I talking about?
Well, same thing we were talking about this morning, not the party house, but the other issue. Building codes.
Okay.
Tell me
What
your take
specifically?
on it.
There's, in the past, talking to multiple builders, they do get slowed down frequently, with the permitting process, and the unavailability of inspectors.
Okay. So that's your two major concerns?
Yeah,
All right,
that's the conversation that we've had with multiple ones.
okay, thank you.
All right, that's it.
It's Andy Lee.
All right. I think Mr. Mulder gets the general idea that that department needs some work. Okay. Julian, Tri-County Tech not meeting the needs of industry. Has this been brought up in Oconee Business Education Partnership? Have you been able to make those meetings?
I have not been able to. I have spoken with them and I have not heard that. I've actually heard the opposite of that, and a lot of their new programs that they're trying to do is more hands-on issues and learning, which has been probably some of the biggest issues instead of, because the issue has been is when somebody is implanted into an industry, it takes a specific amount of time to do it. But I think for every one negative story you hear, and I imagine as colleges around, you hear 14 positives. And I think that's kind of what, we see on here and what we talk with. I mean, I think with Tri-County is ever changing in what they're trying to do and stay on top with the industry. And if it's, a single person, I mean, if you own a business, it may take the hiring of 7 individuals to find one person that is doing the job right. So, I did not bring up that not meeting the needs of the industry, but I have not heard that, and from several other things. And then speaking with Richard on that, again, it has been the opposite of that. It's just been, there's a learning curve that some people take, and sometimes it's bigger for one than the other. But, from my perspective, from what I've seen, Tri-County Tech's doing a, great job of putting people to work in there and pleasing the needs of industry. Now, I imagine there's, like you said, the diesel engine, that's a totally different thing. Things that are outside the spectrum of Tri-County Tech. Obviously, they can't meet the needs of every kind of industry, but for those that in Oconee County, from what I've understood, they've been doing a really good job. There's some things that they've had to work on, but I think that they're speaking together. And if Tri-County Tech's not made aware of an issue, then they can't correct it. And that's one of the things that we need to make sure of if we're having an issue in the industry. And I think Mr. Blackwell's done a very good job at that in going into Tri-County and saying, okay, we need this. We're having an issue with this. Or we don't have enough of this specifically.
Okay, and the other thing you're going to look at for us is recreation funding, but piggybacking on what Paul Kane was saying earlier, recreation is one of those things that would be best paid for with a capital project sales tax.
Well, building facilities and funding recreation is two different things. You know, your capital sales tax can build the facilities, but you still have to have a specific amount of funding, and this kind of comes down to, you know, where, our effort is. Obviously, looking at the budget cycle that we have right here in front of us, there's not a ability to increase any kind of funding opportunities on the recreation side of things. But, you know, my biggest concern with recreation funding is if we continue to take away from our youth and continue to not have the ability for them to have affordable recreation, which is happening all over this county, it's becoming more and more expensive, for them to do that. Recreation has, saved a lot of people in this county, and I think a lot of people can talk about the impacts that it made on them as a youth, and it kept them from going a specific way. And, we're spending tons of money on the backside of things, arresting people for drugs and vandalism, as we've seen that has hit several of our cities, because the youth don't have anything to do. Now, I'm not saying that you magically build recreation facilities and fund recreation and this stuff stops, but it's been proven that it does decrease these issues. And, it's just one of those things. If you want to, change a kid's life, put them in some kind of recreation. It's not just football and basketball. There's all kinds of different avenues of recreation. There's art, there's music, there's all kinds of things that can come under recreation programs that, will help with the issues that we have. And the biggest thing is once they get into high school, they've made their way in life. They know kind of which way they're going, and you can speak to teachers and they can, tell these individuals that's come through, and that's, there needs to be some emphasis on recreation. This county has, turned its eye on recreation and just told the cities to fund it. But they're out, I think $400,000 to $600,000 in my district. City of Seneca's $1.4 to $1.5 million out of pocket. Walhalla's around $500,000 out of pocket. Recreation is not a moneymaker. It builds a person. And to me, if we're not building these kids at a young age, we can't fix them when they make that turn. And I know recreation was very important to me. It kept me out of a lot of trouble, with the coaches and everything that I was around. My father being one of those, it changed a lot of kids' life. And, those kids that make that other choice, it's idle hands, and that's the trouble. And it's, I think Mr. McCall's brought that up before. Kids are going to be kids. That's why we got to keep them busy. And, recreation, opportunities need to be enhanced in Oconee County instead of, the cities will handle it. Here's 10,000, here's 20,000, because it's not enough. It's as big of a problem as our, volunteer firefighters, if not larger, because the amount of people it serves is something that we really need to look at. And I'm willing to, be the helm of that on what the future of recreation is in Oconee County.
Do you want to come up with a plan?
I'd be glad to lead that.
Okay, I'll put you down for that.
Madam Chair.
You can add that to your fire plan as well. Yes,
Going back to about Tri-County Tech, there is in the workplace, and the school system too. They're not meeting the needs. We got a company open in Baxter. It's gonna open. They're gonna be rating all the other companies, not just JCI, but anybody that does molding, for skilled molding operators, because there are none. So Baxter's gonna come up, everybody knows this, it's not a secret. They're gonna be offering to pay a lot more money, whatever it takes to get them off the ground and going. There's another molding place that is behind Lowe's. They run molds for other people. They can't get, it's a very clean environment down there. I've been in that plant before. They can't get, skilled, the programs aren't offered. Industrial electricity, they're not prepared. They get out of Tri-County Tech, and they get on, other companies say, I talk to other people in industrial maintenance, they say, well, these kids we can't turn them loose. They don't even know basics, and you ask them, well, what? Well, I have to look on my laptop. Well, you're on the floor. You ain't got time to look on your laptop. You can't read a voltometer. You can't, you don't know that this circuit's energized. You can't touch those screws. This is the end result. I got another girl, a friend of mine's daughter, she graduated from welding at the vocational center. And she got a B. Well, she would have got an A, except she said that told the instructor, she doesn't run a grinder and she doesn't like cleaning up. She just likes to weld. So rather than the instructor give her an F, which she should have got, she got a B. That's padding, that's making everybody feel warm and fuzzy. On the national level, this is for all trades, apprenticeship program, for me, it was a degree in mathematics or industrial arts in 6 years. Nationally, now we're gonna cut it down to 4 years because the students are getting bored before they get their 6 years in. And they're trying to attract more people, so we lowered the bar. And that's not doing a service to make your numbers look good, and that's just some of the problems. And that's not here. That's on the national level. The move is to cut it to 4 years for all trades. That's just some of the things that we're not going to solve this as a council, but it's some things that are coming about.
Mr. Mulder, do we know anything about what the curriculum's going to look like at the new campus?
Not specifically, no, ma'am. I know it's gonna concentrate on the 4 or 5 specialty areas, CNC, mechatronics,
Industrial electronics.
industrial electronics. So there's about 4 or 5 specialty programs that's gonna be operated out of there to begin with. But as far as curriculum, I don't think I have any specifics, no, ma'am. But I do know the general
All right,
course of studies.
let's move along. Mr. Mulder, your management restructure plan.
Yeah, we've moved halfway there. We've taken care of that with Mr. Martin. So,
Okay.
based on our conversation at the last council meeting, went ahead and moved that forward there. And, I have some other ideas that, coming out of tonight's meeting, that we can make some adjustments.
Okay, and we're moving ahead on litter. I think we've made some progress just this weekend. All right, on that note, I'd like to stop here. I think we're all in overload right now.
Madam Chair, may I just give you just one piece of information to update?
Yes.
On the ADA compliance for the parks. We have some updated numbers for you.
Okay,
High Falls, if we actually build these in-house, we had our Lake Julian do a takeoff on them. High Falls would be 125,000, not 214, and then Chaw Ram will be 100 and not 150. So just for your point of information, just to correct that, we did finally get some updated numbers from Mr. Julian, and he feels like that, you know, he could build those for those particular prices.
okay.
Okay?
Is there an issue if we had a complaint that they would possibly have to shut those parks down?
Yes, we could conceivably have a complaint filed, that at this point, a court would basically have to award them their complaint or whatever and force us to close it down. Because I don't believe we've done anything to those facilities to require a complete ADA upgrade. There becomes a point under the federal laws that if you do a certain thing to that particular facility, you've got to come into today's compliance. We haven't done those. But I think that if we were sued or some issue occurred out there, that a judge or a court could say, yes, you're in violation, you need need to do something with the building, I would guess.
I would just prefer for my part to talk about it in an executive session item. They're just kind of case by case, fact by
Right.
fact specific, and something could be required or not, so I don't want to opine just general.
Nor would we make you.
I tried.
Okay. All right, enough for one day?
I'll make a motion, we adjourn then.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Uh,